All right, welcome back once again to lesson number 6 in Module 2 for our 5 Homes to Freedom program. We'll jump right in here. So this is another relatively short little lesson, and the whole premise of this one is how to stay out of jail. And when I saw that little cartoon, I thought that looked too cute and funny to not include. But on the serious side, I mean, we do need to be very aware of what we can and cannot do when it comes to the world of investing. So in the game or in the world of investing, there's a Securities Commission, and the Securities Commission is a very strong-armed group of individuals who regulate themselves, and I don't necessarily agree with all of their practices. I agree with the concept that there needs to be a regulatory body to govern over and watch all of the different types of investment schemes that are out there, because you've got your Bernie Madoffs and all these other high-profile and issues out there where people are losing their shirt, and it's a shame that it's happening. So the Securities Commission, their role is to oversee all of the different types of investments out there and make sure that people follow the rules and that the little guy is being protected. So the bottom line is, it is a government body created to ensure that the little guy isn't abused by the big guy. Now, others may say that it's also designed to prevent the little guy from playing with the big guy. I sort of see both sides of there. I was involved with a company that had to follow the Securities Commission's rules and guidelines, so I got to see the difficulty it was for the company to meet all of these rules and regulations, which they did. But then on the flip side, I also saw how easy it was to manipulate and or avoid these rules and regulations. So it's something that it's designed to be there to protect the little guy, but unfortunately, it also prevents that little guy from participating in some really good, solid investment opportunities. But that's just the reality. That's what we have to work with. So you need to be aware of that, and it's a very serious game once you get in there. So the fines are extremely hefty, especially if you are operating underneath a corporation or as a corporation, then the fines are even greater. So let's take a look at, in the U.S., the Securities Commission is called the Securities and Exchange Commission. You definitely want to make sure you are aware of what the rules and regulations are in your jurisdiction, whatever state you happen to be operating in. In Canada, it's the same thing. It's called a Securities Commission, and each province has their own Securities Commission. On a high level, they do tend to follow the same guidelines and rules, but some of them are definitely a little bit different. So what can you not do, rather? Well, quite simply, you can't raise capital. You simply can't go out there, start raising capital tomorrow. And you can't advertise your deals. And if you're going to raise capital and advertise deals, then you have to understand what the securities rules are and what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. You're going to have to provide prospectus, which means you're going to have to spend thousands of dollars to have accountants and lawyers do their due diligence on your particular deal before you can share that deal with the general public to raise capital. So it's such a mess that you just want to stay away from it. And as I say, it can be very, very serious if you get involved in there and you get caught by the Securities Commission. Sometimes you'll just get a slap on the hand if you're doing something innocent. For example, I had a student years ago who was advertising in a national newspaper to raise capital for a deal. He had a response to his ad, and a meeting was set up, and the meeting was well, he was blindsided because the meeting was set up by the person from the Securities Commission, and they interviewed him, and then halfway through, and he said, listen, I know what you're trying to do. What you're doing, though, is breaking the law. I'm not going to fine you. I'm just going to let you go with a warning, but you have to stop. What we're looking for is the big fish. But it certainly scared my student considerably, and scared him enough that he never entertained doing that again. So, how can you raise capital? Well, you can only advertise to what they call an accredited investor. And what an accredited investor is, and again, you have to look into your local jurisdiction to see what the definitions are for each jurisdiction. Where I'm living, an accredited investor is somebody who has a net worth that exceeds $1 million, but that does not include the value of their own personal residence as well. Or it could also be a person who has an annual income of $200,000, or between the two couple, it's $300,000 when you include the spouse's income. So you can advertise to those individuals without having to worry about Securities Commission. The challenge is, how do you find those people? How do you know those people? You know, it could be the plumber next door is considered to be an accredited investor because he's a very astute investor, but he doesn't look like one because he drives a beat-up old truck and he's a plumber. So people don't walk around with a sign on their back saying, I'm an accredited investor. The other people that you can approach about your deals is your family and or close friends. The close friends becomes a little bit of a gray area because what is deemed to be a close friend, and there's no clear definition on this, but the guideline is if you exchange cards, birthday cards, you maybe travel together, you do trips together, you visit each other on a regular basis, you're then a close friend. You're not an acquaintance. So why only an accredited investor? That's the question a lot of people say. Well, again, it goes back to the fact that in the eyes of the government, or the powers to be, they believe that the lower income earners are deemed to be less financially literate, and therefore they're going to be at a much higher risk to lose their investments, and they can't afford to lose their investments because that's all they have. They don't have the ability to go out and earn more. Whereas somebody who is making $200,000, $300,000 a year, they have the ability to lose $50,000 investment and rebound. It's not going to be detrimental to them. They're not going to like it, but they can recover. Somebody who is in a lower income bracket, for them to lose $50,000, that could be their life savings, and it could take them years and years to be able to recover from that loss. So it's to protect those individuals. So again, what can you not do? And it sounds a bit repetitive, I'm sorry, but this is extremely important for you to understand what you can or cannot do. You can't advertise your deals to the general public because you don't know, when you're advertising to the general public, you don't know who's reading that deal. You don't know whether it's an accredited investor or a non-accredited. You cannot approach the general public with a deal, which means you can't go to a general meeting and stand up there and announce that you've got this particular deal for sale. You do not claim that you are paying out a fixed rate of return for your investment. So don't go to your joint venture partner and say, or a lender and say, lend me, a joint venture, sorry. Don't go to your joint venture partner and say, lend me X number of dollars and I'll guarantee a 10% return to you. Because what happens if you don't meet that 10% return? What is the actual guarantee? So the Securities Commission really looks for marketing or advertising that's got these guaranteed rates built into them. So never use the word guaranteed. So the question is, I know a lot of people are asking, well, how do I raise capital? So I'll share with you. We're going to talk a little bit more about this in the next lesson in more detail, but very quickly, how I raise capital. Early on, when I first got started, I used family's capital. I used my brother-in-law's money to do a rehab. So that's the easiest way because you're dealing with people who know and trust you. As I gained more experience, I started to share my experience with other people. And by sharing my experience with other people, it just gave me more credibility. So I started to speak at the local investment clubs, just sharing my knowledge with anybody and everybody who would listen. Playing Cash Flow 101, which is a board game that Robert Kiyosaki created, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And this is a great game to use in a social networking environment, and it also is a great tool to educate people about the value of investing in real estate. I personally, from playing the game Cash Flow, have raised over $300,000 in investment funds. Writing a monthly newsletter, sharing with people what it is you're doing is hugely important. The challenge here is that most people will start off writing a monthly newsletter, but then they'll get a little bit lazy about it, and all of a sudden the monthly newsletter becomes a quarterly newsletter, and maybe I'll put one out this year, maybe not. So if you're going to do it, it has to be consistent. And I'll get into more details in the next lesson with that. Also, with more experience, I started to build a database. And this is something everybody can do. It took me a long time to learn the value of a database. So as you start to deal with people, network with people, even if you have nothing to sell them, nothing to acquire from them, start to build a database. Ask if they would be interested in receiving your monthly newsletter. Then you're just basically going to start teaching and sharing with this database and other closed group of investors, because when people sign up for your newsletter, they have come to you looking for more information. So it's okay to market to these individuals. When you go to a closed group like an investment group, those individuals are there for the purpose and intent of investing in real estate. So it's a little bit of a gray area, but that's where you can stand up and say, I'm looking for a joint venture partner, or I'm looking for a money partner. So you can do it in those environments as well. So that's the end of our session for today. The homework assignment that I would like everybody to do, though, is to actually start spending some time researching the Securities Commission where you live and or where you plan to invest, because if I'm on the East Coast and I plan to invest on the West Coast, I need to, or if I'm going to attract investors from the West Coast, then I need to know the rules and regulations in that market as well. So the bottom line is understand what you can do, and more importantly, what you cannot do, and stay within those rules. So I will expand more on this in the next lesson. So if I haven't answered your questions, just hold tight, and we'll hopefully get to those questions moving forward. In the meantime, if you need to reach out to me, Ken at 5homestofreedom.com, and I'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So until next time, we'll see you at the top. Take care.